Step into analysis, please.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we're talking about Charlotte, the Betrayer. This theory, which I've so wow-inspiredly nicknamed, is based around a central thesis. Charlotte is working for a third-party company, not yet named, and her goal is getting the data out of the park for this company, as opposed to Delos or the Delos Research Group like it's so boldly claimed. This theory might seem a bit out there, but more and more evidence has been mounting for this reveal, so I'd like to examine this from the introduction of the package to the present. If you're one of my awesome subscribers, you may hear some reoccurring evidence, so just bear with me while I put the complete picture together. Before we get started, I want to give a big thank you to all of the wonderful, beautiful people who support me. Those who subscribe, those who donate on Patreon. We just hit 17,000 subscribers, and the community grows bigger and bigger every day. You all inspire me, and I hope to keep bringing quality content to your connected device for as long as you'd enjoy hearing it. I'd also like to thank Syfy and HuffingtonPost for sharing my video about the cradle theory recently, as well as NerdSoup. NerdSoup is another YouTuber that makes really great content. If you haven't checked him out, be sure to do so now. But without further ado, let us overthink an HBO show about robots. Starting off, let's examine the early days of this plan. It begins all the way back with Teresa and a host called Maurice. Maurice here is the one sketching star constellations into the back of whittled turtle shells. He self-inflicts enough damage to destroy the center cortex, and we learn this was to ensure if the host was stopped, that the perpetrator's plan couldn't be uncovered. Elsie blackmails her way into a one-on-one with the body and finds the laser uplink that would allow people to smuggle data out of the park via satellite. Elsie makes the claim that the host is being used for industrial espionage. Fitting, huh? That after everything that's happened with robotic revolution and immortality goals, that this could still be in play in the background. Bernard gets the data from the older host geocaching system and uploads it to Elsie before we find the other rogue hosts. The first time we're introduced to Charlotte is on the Mesa's remarkable rooftop resort while Lee makes an ass out of himself. We come back to Elsie discussing being close to who the remote uplink would have been to, and Delos being oh so gracious that she stopped this insidious plot of corporate espionage. We next find Elsie using the underground tunnels and telling Bernard it was in fact a Delos satellite, and that it came from a transmitter in the abandoned theater. Before she gets taken, she reveals that it was Teresa who was trying to smuggle the data out.
I'm the person who was smuggling out our data. It was Teresa, Bernard.
Teresa goes to Charlotte's room. Take note, Teresa is the Delos-assigned head of QA. Charlotte is on the Delos Destinations board of directors, so pretty high up there, but still not at the top of the Delos conglomerate. She immediately brings up the woodcutter incident and how disappointing it was compared to her other performance. Details that the research group and the 35 years worth of data they've been collecting has been stuck here due to an oversight by her predecessor. It's not exactly clear if that is William or not, as he was the person who created this research group, but the assumption is that the oversight was the size of the data, as we see her talking with Lee later on, stating that it cannot fit onto any traditional hard drive for transport because of its size, but that a host mind would have no problem, and of course the other oversight was probably Ford stopping their attempts. Charlotte also wants Teresa to guess why she thinks they need to secure this outside of the park. The answer is to back up all of this data outside of the reach of Ford if he were to take his ousting poorly, so that he doesn't destroy everything he so preciously created in one fell swoop. The idea of a backup or insurance policy is referenced once again when Charlotte and Bernard are looking for Peter in season 2. And what's interesting is when Carl finds the cradle destroyed and 1/3 of the host mines empty, he states that that's 1/3 of the park's IP taken out. So let's sidetrack for a moment. Could the cradle be the data file they want to get out of the park? The data so insanely massive it could only fit onto a host's mind, which in turn happens to be one of the powering devices of the cradle. The cradle is described as a hive mind, meaning they all contribute the computing power running the narratives peer-to-peer so that they don't need a large beefy supercomputer to simulate everything. Oh, you thought these were server racks? No, they're actually copies of each mind helping run the system. So if your goal was to have a contingency plan to have an insurance policy if Ford does destroy everything in the park, it makes sense to get the cradled copy of every mind, story, and persona instead of just a giant wheelbarrow full of physical brains. It makes sense, except it kind of doesn't at the same time. Firstly, Charlotte states that she doesn't give a rat's ass about the host storylines.
The host's minds, the storylines.
I don't give a rat's ass about the host.
It's our little research project that Delos cares about. That's where the real value is.
The second point against this being the data is if you need every single mind connected to this machine to split processing like a hive mind and be a part of the world that's simmed inside the cradle, how could you fit all of that data into a single host? And if you could fit all of this data onto one host mind, why wouldn't the cradle just be a single pearl in this room that you would upload more narratives to? It's something to think about, but the show writers could just add one single line about compressing the data, but even so, making the claim that every single host mind in the simulation software is on a single mind is pretty bold, because we also know they didn't have the cradle software at the research group. Oh, how do we know that? Because if they did, why on earth would they spend physical resources creating this entire James Delos environment when you could just put the newest build in the cradle and every time it fails, redo and redo, adjusting code and making better builds for long-term viability, like what Ford is doing with Arnold's mind right now? So that leaves us with either believing 35 years worth of data is the cradle offline copied to a host mind, or this is something else entirely, like Hale so boldly proclaimed as something more pertinent to the research project which proved to be the quest for immortality. With the developments in Season 2, it provided that Ford knew about this immortality research, and them making a backup of this data means that this was one of the things they were afraid that he would smash on his way out, which of course he does have Bernard destroy the outpost, and oddly enough, now William is on a quest to destroy the Valley Beyond. Wow. So in my other video, I proposed James Delos wasn't the only one they were working to transfer into a host body. If this 35 years worth of data is the minds and DNA of potentially thousands of people they were working to offer immortality to, then I could see that. In my Valley Beyond video, I discuss a timeline of medical advancement Delos would have working in secret here, without any regulations or without any government interception, and on human-like hosts that can be rebuilt if the medical testing fails. So the data collection started for marketing purposes, recording discussions and viewing body language, things that they would talk about in hopes that they could better sell products on all their other Delos Incorporated goods that they've monopolized. Well, at some point, DNA collection comes into play, and I really don't see them making the claim they've discovered a gene that makes you buy more shoes. Sorry, babe. So I think they collect this DNA from guests on their first visit, begin creating a replica body in secret, and if they're able to afford it, offer them a place hidden from God, the Valley Beyond. So if this package is more pertinent to the research project, this data very well may be all of the data collected by Delos Research Group. 35 years of immortality research. So yeah, one very valuable package. Now that we've identified what the package likely is, we come back to episode 7 and the failed plot to show Clementine malfunctioning and Teresa being brought to the house in the woods where Ford is, taking her out. I want to highlight the elevator conversation before the event. Teresa states that Ford is done, and she's getting the Delos-owned IP, the host minds and storylines, out of the park as well as something deeper than guests playing cowboy. Meaning the package could be both, the Cradle and the research group project. We next come to them examining Teresa, dead. Stubbs makes the following remark.
It's loaded with a suite of proprietary data, including some of the host's core code. We've had problems in the past with third parties attempting to extort or bribe employees for similar packages.
And Charlotte looks worried, quickly puts the device down, and questions if they know who the data was for. After Teresa is out of the picture, Hale turns to Lee Sizemore, employing him on the plot to get the data out of the park. For reference, the only other time they had an encounter was when he was drunk and hitting on her, and later when he was pissing on the map of the park. Before their official introduction. She is taking advantage of what she sees as a pitiable but wanting man, and manipulating him to get what she wants in exchange for a favored view by higher-ups. This scene occurs using her title as a board member to revoke any question about this practice that he might have, never questioning if what she was doing was really for the board. She is using a proxy every step of this process, first with Teresa, and then with Lee, so that if something does go wrong, it's put on them. Does that sound like she's securing the data for the greater good of the company? I understand needing to hide it from Ford, but why everyone else? Why not just have a team do this? Why is it always one manipulated person in between her and this action? He agrees to aid her endeavor, and they enter the cold storage. They pick Peter and provide the line about uploading more data than could fit on any hard drive. Lee questions if this is the host code. She snaps that it doesn't concern him, because she is only giving him what he needs to believe that he is helping Delos, thus advance his career. The next time we see Lee and Charlotte is in episode 10. He made Abernathy into a thin character host, and he states the bulk of what's filling up his brain is blackmail. She replies that you're not thinking big enough, which again comes to the data collected for guests and the Immortality Project. The Delos Destinations board of directors arrive, and Lee Sizemore does what he does best and talks without ever asking questions, believing that once Ford is out, he will be in full creative control. This actually makes me really nervous that if this plan is exposed in the present, and Delos acts to correct or punish this action, we might see the end of our lovable donkey boy, not at the hand of a robotic horde as he fears, but by his own team not believing that he was manipulated to performing this task. After all, he was the one who put the data inside Peter to begin with. Starting off in Season 2, we learn that Delos, who can be identified by them stating they are Delos, a very hard-to-see Delos logo on the warship, and cards that have it written on the back. And they inform Bernard that they've been in the dark for about 2 weeks. The confirmation of who these people work for and their allegiance will be relevant later on, but showing us this confirmation is important. The next relevant point comes when they arrive at the Delos Research Group outpost. Bernard is unaware that it exists. This is the place, or realistically one of the places, that have been collecting data now stored in Peter Abernathy's head. But the thing is, this place has been inside the park the entire time. All of these outposts have been in the park the entire time, and no one except for high-ranking Delos employees and Ford have ever found them. This level of integration to the park's systems, seemingly underground entirely, with billions in research and development, all products testing without ever raising a red flag to any other person working in the park, most importantly, the diligent Ashley Stubbs, who is outraged when he later finds out. The point is, getting all of this equipment in secret, is one hell of a task. I can't imagine them importing giant James Delos incubation chambers through the front door, and equally important, they would need a way to keep their activity of snatching hosts from QA. So I propose there's only 2 options at that point. Either 35 years worth of supplies, everything for testing, building hosts, environments, chambers, etc., was either put here from the start when William established this project and they've never ran out of supplies, or there's another route to traverse in and out of the park for this Delos research group. The logistics of planning 35 years of innovations, I'm privy to say, is probably impossible, so I'm leaning more toward this additional route in and out of the park. So if this route exists, why would the board instruct Charlotte to perform this task at all? Surely if the data is the research group project, they could just ship it out from there. How does it ever get to Charlotte in the first place? The humans working on the Immortality Project could send this simple pearl of data to a random offsite location. I mean, they're harboring the fact that the creator of Delos is living in perpetual torment. I imagine that signing an NDA that says, hey, don't talk about the pearl you sent to an offsite location would be in scope. Then re-examine who she goes to for help after her first puppet Teresa dies, Lee Sizemore, the person she's met only twice, once of those being pissing on the map of the park. She saw him as an expendable person who, if caught, would be thrown to the sharks with no issue. So the point of bringing that up again is that now that we know everything Delos can do in secret inside of this company, it doesn't exactly display that she's being supported by this company. But back to the story. Charlotte pulls up a terminal and communicates with who appears to be Delos. She authenticates with a biometric face signature scan and it logs in. She then types what appears to be a password, but it's actually not. It's a secure channel where she can communicate about delivering this package, and it lifts the communications embargo. They tell her that she would need to send the package before extraction protocol began. Without ever seeing anyone else communicate with Delos, their response is extraction protocol suspended. So Delos doesn't know what happened at all. We never see anyone communicate about the massacre, but they're stating in this line that the extraction has been suspended, meaning that there was already a plan in place for extraction. So I believe this is the third party for that exact reason. She's talking to an unknown recipient on a secure channel with plans to be extracted after sending this package before anything ever went wrong in the park. And yeah, no one, not even people in the show, believe that Delos would wait 2 weeks before sending help.
So Delos is willing to let us all die until they can retrieve one host.
Come on. You really think that Delos is going to keep hundreds of guests in danger while they wait for one control unit worth of data?
If this entire plan was for a backup that Delos could host offsite in case things got hairy, well, the entire plan shits the bed right now because it's hairy. Oh, it's hairy as it can possibly be. Why would they not storm the beach right then to retrieve this information? You know why they don't? Because it's not Delos' plan at all. Because it doesn't make sense. I will tattoo this to my body if I am wrong. No company in the world, if they're trying to get trillions in IP out of a hostile environment, leave it to one one person who is unarmed. They have warships and an army that could surge this entire island and locate Peter easily. And sure, granted, as many of you pointed out in other videos, more people mean higher chances that this data could be shot in the head. I get that. But dude, a single force would be better than just, meh, good luck. The thing that we care about more than you, we're just going to let you handle this and sit back and let us know when you're ready to be pulled out. No way. So this begs the question, why did it take so long for Delos to arrive, and why didn't this third party help either? Starting off with the third party, it's because the island is located around the military titan that is China, and Delos and them work very closely together to control this island. They wouldn't risk sending an extraction team for the person who failed her mission. She too is expendable. Then let's also address why it took Delos so long to get there. Well, I'm so glad you asked. Remember last episode when Elsie said the thing about quarantine notices, and I harped on it saying that it was important, but we never see this in the show? Well, about 50% of you let me know that it was the website ARG telling us this place was off limits. This was something that I considered before, and ultimately ruled against. However, I was wrong. The notice wasn't for the outside world, it was for the Delos intranet. My theory is that it prevented Delos from coming to the island because the rest of the company is now being informed not to. The system which we know sending these quarantine notices is under Ford's control. The only other time we see someone reach out for help is when Lee finds this phone, which we don't know what comes of this or what it can reach, but I wouldn't be surprised if he either can't get through or does get through to the mainland, and they tell him that it's blocked because of this viral outbreak, and they can't risk it getting out, meaning Delos remains in the dark thinking that the island is combating some virus until the cradle gets destroyed and the notices stop. So again, Charlotte doesn't communicate with anyone but this third party as she already plans to be extracted. Ford is likely sending quarantine notices out so that Dolores and company have time to accomplish their goals or get ready to escape. The notices stop when the system is eventually destroyed and the real Delos able to see what's going on. Either Lee will finally be able to make his collect call, or they'll arrive after not hearing from anyone once the quarantine stops, and boom. They come to an island looking for high priority people, trying to understand why they have no intel on an entire board of directors going missing from this multi-billion trillion dollar corporation for 2 weeks. Now, what about the team we see drop in to extract Peter? Say hello to your third party. Start with the invite. A biometric authentication uses this command to access the secure channel, and the remote end is mainland unknown admin. I mean, come on. This is the only person who doesn't have a user account in this company. You know who uses the generic admin accounts if not disabled? Bad guys trying to hide their footprints inside a company. The Delta team arrive, and Stubbs has a very confused look on his face, and the person is noticeably a dick to Stubbs. The person demands to communicate only with Charlotte, not inquiring about any of the other Delos members that are lost in this park. When Stubbs makes the statement that his guys are working to get external communications back online, he tells him to get his techs out of the system. Pretty interesting that the guy from Delos would want to stop the advancement of establishing communications. The Delta team wears no logo, nor do they have anything with the Delos logo on it, which is relevant when compared to the beach scene. Charlotte joins them and says the package is on another floor, and he immediately commands for his team to retrieve it, as it is his only concern. Goldberg here is also important because she is later found dead. In the start of episode 5, we see her laying on the ground, meaning they failed to extract the package, which explains why we see Strand and Charlotte interacting at all, and Charlotte requesting Strand and others if they've found this specific host. But Carl examines her body. But why? Why is he staring? Is he upset about losing a coworker, or perhaps he doesn't know or recognize who this person is with? Moments later, when draining the lake, he tells this woman to bring Peter directly to him instead of Charlotte. I believe this is because he is suspicious and wants to understand why there are other players in the control room now, and why this one package is so important to this one human who's managed to stay alive through every encounter. So there it is, Charlotte the Betrayer theory in all of its glory. I believe Charlotte is working for a third-party company, not yet shown because of the subtle hints throughout the season 1 that this happens, the scale of the research project and their needing of another entrance to traverse, the remote parties and their cryptic conversations, the plot that any company would purposely wait 2 weeks under this circumstance. But with that, I leave it to you. What do you think about this theory? Are you convinced as I am, or nope, I'm simply just out of my mind? Starting this week, my wife has pressured me into doing a giveaway, but I also think it's a fun idea. Just follow the link in the description on how to enter. It's super simple, and the prize is a couple Funko Pops and a gift card for HBO, just as a way to give back to the community that has given me so much. Big shout out to this month's highest tier donators, Robert Holtz, John Levin, and Chris Cole. These will be the people tattooing. It doesn't make sense for a company to wait 2 weeks if I am actually wrong about that. So give them lots of love, and if you want to support me directly, do consider joining Patreon or subscribing today. Much love, everybody. I can't wait to talk to you again soon.